I would encourage parents to shift that focus from all I want is my kid to be happy to all I want is my kid, to be who they are, to be who God sent them into the world to be.
Wow.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Kelly, welcome for the first time to Focus on the Family.
Thank you for having me here. It's a huge honor.
Now, you've written this book called Lovable. Let's start in that spot. Several years ago, you bought a coffee pot. I love this in the book, this analogy of the coffee pot.
Yeah.
Because I have the same problem with my coffee pot, but it wasn't the beginning of a spiritual lesson for me. So tell us how the coffee pot was used by God to speak to your heart.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we were still using the coffee pot that we bought in grad school, maybe the one we'd gotten when we got married in grad school. And it finally gave up the ghost. And, we ordered one on Amazon, and it had great ratings. It was advertised as this sort of fancy thing that didn't require a heating pad. And we couldn't figure out how to get it to work. We couldn't figure out how to keep our coffee hot in it.
That's why it didn't need a heating pad.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's not hot to begin with. So I went to Google, as we do these days, and I said, I started to type in how to keep coffee hot, but I typed in how to keep age, and I sort of misspelled it. And Google auto-completed that search, and the number one search that came up was how to keep him interested. And as a psychologist and a guy who's been interested in marriage and so on and so forth, I thought, well, that's interesting. I clicked on it. There's all these articles about the specific things that a woman needs to do to keep a man interested in her. Huh. And most of them involved bringing a sandwich at the right time or a drink at the right time or stroking his ego in just a certain way, looking a certain way.
And that kind of offended you, though, right?
Yeah.
It put you off.
As a dad with a daughter who's 3, right? I'm picturing her, 20 years down the road.
Exactly.
And having to search that on the internet because she can't figure out why he's not interested. And so it sort of got me hot. The coffee wasn't, but I was. I found that a letter sort of just flowed out of me explaining that she is inherently interesting and that relationships are about 2 people coming together who've decided you are interesting, and now I just want to become a student of you.
Well, this is a letter you wrote to her.
I wrote it to Caitlin. Yeah. She's 3 at the time, obviously not going to be able to understand it, but I read it to my wife, and my wife started crying.
Oh, yeah.
And to that point, I'd never published anything incredibly personal on my blog. And she said, I think you need to put this on your blog. And so I did, and it was the start of something new in our lives.
Well, it took off. It went viral, and people read it. And in that context, you're trying to convince your daughter, or at least have a conversation with your daughter about beauty and worthiness and what it means.
Right.
I would say every woman just leaned in. Because that's the desire of their heart in terms of, am I beautiful enough? And am I worthy enough for your love?
Yeah, so in the year after that first letter, Caitlin and I had developed a bedtime routine. We say the Lord's Prayer, and we alternate the verses of it. And then I would say to her, are you beautiful on the outside? And she says, yes. And I say, and where are you the most beautiful? And she says, on the inside. So trying to affirm that we can enjoy our outer beauty, but that there's an eternal, unfading, undying beauty on the inside that is much more reliable. And around the time that we developed that ritual, a friend of mine, texted me and said, "I'm in the makeup aisle of a department store, and this is heavy." Like, he was picking up something for his wife, and he imagined his daughter and his wife in there. And he said, the messages in this aisle are too much for any woman to handle. So I wanted to find out what that was all about, and so I went to a makeup aisle and saw these words plastered around the makeup aisle. All these really great words, but words about physical beauty that just...
Do you recall them? I've not been in the makeup aisle lately, but...
So I put them in...
what did it sound like?
I put them in a letter to Caitlin. Words like affordably gorgeous, infallible, flawless finish, brilliant strength, liquid power, go nude, age-defying, instant age rewind, choose your dream, nearly naked, and natural beauty, like all these words, right?
And what messages do they give young ladies?
Young ladies.
Teens.
Exactly. And this is where the teens are the ones entering this aisle for the first time and getting these messages. So so I wanted to write a letter that didn't give her different words, but reclaimed those words for her inner beauty. So I wrote a second letter to her about a year after the first, and that one also went viral, and she and I wound up on the Today Show, which was a total blast.
Shame to me is poison. It's hard to control. I'm not sure why we as married couples, why we particularly as parents, and I do it. Unfortunately, I try not to do it, but it squirts out. It's like almost uncontainable.
Right.
Where you shame your children because they're not meeting a performance standard that you have for them. And, it can be subtle. It can be aggressive. I hope I never do that. But, little things like if you don't get a better grade, you may not be going to college.
Yeah.
If you don't get that trash taken out, it means your character is a little flawed. You can't follow directions. I mean, whatever it might be and how you do it, speak to shame and the power of shame in all of us.
I think there's at least two reasons we find ourselves doing it as parents. Whatever is inside of us overflows, right? So if we have a lot of shame that we carry around inside of us, it's going to overflow accidentally onto the people around us. If we're filled with love, then that's what's going to overflow. We're going to pass love along. So I think that's part of it, is that we're just all carrying around a lot of shame. It accumulates over the course of a lifetime. And so it eventually is going to spill out on even the people we love, the people we don't want to shame. I think the other reason that we sometimes do it a little bit less accidentally is that it works. Shame is a great short-term motivator. No one wants to feel it. And so we'll do it with our kids because, if we need to get them studying, shaming them is a great way to motivate them.
But long-term, it's unhealthy.
Long-term, it's unhealthy because shame ultimately demotivates us. Shame ultimately becomes something that we hide, that we think we need to hide ourselves. It causes us to shut down, to become less creative, to become less innovative, to become less who we were here to be, or who we are here to be. So, eventually shame becomes corrosive. But in the short term, we get results. And as a parent, we all know, right? Like, it's exhausting. It's hard. You don't know what to do half the time. And if you can get a result today, you go for it.
Well, and that's human nature too,
right.
To be fair. We're looking for shortcuts. How do I get to where I need to go with my child as quickly as possible? But it's important to pull that back because of the long-term damage that can do. In fact, you have a story growing up that was hard, where you were shamed. And what was that?
My father had gone back to school.
How old are you?
I'm it would have to be the third grade. My father had gone back to school a couple years earlier after sort of turning his life around, and my mom had gone back to school as well. So now we're she's working nights as an RN, trying to pay for his schooling. We're living in a trailer park in Missouri while he is wrapping up his undergrad degree at Evangel. And, so he's exhausted. It's late at night. She is working. He's trying to get 3 kids ready for bed while figuring out how he's going to get his studying done. And the hot water heater breaks in the trailer. He just sort of got fed up. And what I remember of that, we all have our filters, and who knows what the actual facts are. But my memory of that was him getting so fed up. He's saying, I'm out of here. I can't take it anymore. I'm gone. And what I remember is wrapping myself around his leg and just refusing to let go. And I actually had not thought about that for probably 25 years. And then I was in my own therapy, and I arrived at a session where my therapist usually picked me up right on time, and 5 minutes passed, and 10 minutes passed, and 15 minutes passed. And I started to get this horrible feeling inside, and I thought he forgot about me. He scheduled somebody else, and so on and so forth. He eventually came out, wisely brought me into the therapy room and said, "How did it feel to be sitting there waiting for me that whole time?" And I said, "It's a weird feeling. It feels like embarrassment." And he said, "Can you think of another time in your life when you felt that?" And all of a sudden I had this memory come back of that time in 3rd grade. And I said, "It felt like that." And he said, "Maybe it's not embarrassment. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's feeling like you're not good enough for me to remember you, not good enough to keep me sticking around," and so on and so forth. And so that was a sort of a game changer for me too, to go, oh, yeah, I've got it too. I'm a human being too. I've got the shame as well.
Kelly, I want to make sure that we're hearing it, because I think this is such a critical issue, this issue of shaming. And again, honestly, I can lean in there sometimes, and I don't like it because I know it's damaging my boys. And I want to make sure other parents are aware of it and are not doing it as well, or using it so sparingly, because it carries such a toxic aroma. Give us more examples of what that shaming might sound like.
Yeah, and when we talk about this with parents, we do like to, and I appreciate you acknowledging that you struggle with it.
I think every human being
Every
does.
human being struggles with it, and as parents, it's real easy to slip into that mode.
Let me say this,
yeah.
especially Christian parents.
Yeah.
Because we have a standard that we're trying to set, and the bar can be really high. You know, perfection is really hard. And, you know, as Christian parents, we're often looking at our kids going, wow, okay, you didn't make the honor roll.
Right.
Wow, okay, you did what?
Yeah.
You said what to who?
Yep.
That's embarrassing. Why would you say that to your friend? You know, her mom's going to call me.
Right.
What am I going to say?
Yeah.
These are all shaming
Yes.
things, aren't they?
Well, and the theme in all of those is that somehow my sense of worth is contingent upon you doing the right things, right? Like, oh, you embarrassed me because you did that. I remember probably the time I shamed my oldest the most. He was probably only 4 or 5, and we'd been invited over to our pastor's house for the first time, and he melted down, right? And I was embarrassed, right?
Yeah, I am for you.
Yeah, and I there was no question that I shamed him as a result of that. I was shaming him, trying to get him to stop, right? And then when he didn't, I really let loose, and so. Yeah, there's an awful lot of pressure that our kids act or behave in a certain way so that we feel worthy as parents.
How do we catch that line, though? I mean,
Yeah.
really, speak to me as a dad or to a mom.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a little bit of truth in what I'm hearing on Focus on the Family. What that guy is saying, Kelly, is that's true. I do that.
Yeah.
How do I not do that?
Right. So you have to give yourself enough space for slow reactions to begin with.
As the adult?
As the adult, yeah.
Now you're hitting me below.
Well, because our shame response tends to be the surface response, the first one. Our graceful response requires much more attention and time and space and energy, actually, and so the shame response is the first. So we have to have a space in our family margins to go, that kid just drove me nuts, right? But I'm going to be thoughtful about my response to them. Yeah. And this is one of the places that I struggle because I'm sort of a doer. I got a billion projects going on all the time. And I have to remember that prioritizing time and space for my family is important. Because if not, I'm going to say things and do things that accidentally imply that they are their actions, that their actions are who they are. And instead, I want to be talking to them about who I see them to be. Okay, the grades aren't great. For instance, my oldest son, Aiden, came to me distraught one day and said, Dad, basically, I'm not getting good grades in school, and school is my thing. It's supposed to be my gig, and I'm going to...
Why did he feel that? Why did he feel school was his gift?
I think because we always delighted in just his affinity for... knowledge.
Well, maybe mom and dad are both PhDs. That might be a little pressure as he gets older.
Right. I mean, and that's a great example. Yeah. Like that's how do we convince him that he doesn't have to do that?
Right.
In order
or
to,
if he wants to do it.
Or to do it.
I mean, that's the key thing. But
yes.
How did that conversation go then? Pick it up. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. No. So how I responded to him was, buddy, maybe the thing about you is that school is not your gift. Maybe that's not who you are. Maybe learning is your gift, and school doesn't always reward the best learning. Now, it's important to try your best at school, and we certainly are still continuing to work with him on that. But to make sure that his sense of identity is rooted in his joy in learning, not his joy in producing an A+, right? Because those are two totally different things. So we want to try to affirm who our kids are, and not necessarily over-focus on affirming what they're doing or not doing.
Yeah. Kelly, I'm not going to let go of the shame thing because I think it's so foundational to what we're talking about. In the book, you mentioned that shame is our original wound. That's true in the garden, isn't it? Of Adam and Eve.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we see there, is that in that moment in which they've done something they knew they shouldn't do, they then became ashamed of it.
And
right?
covered up all the things they did.
Separated themselves from God in that moment, started to hide, and then went on to live separately from him. So I think it's incredibly important to distinguish between sin and shame and to say that we can have sin without shame. But to do that, you have to also distinguish between guilt and shame, right? Because guilt is the sense that I've done something wrong, I need to correct it, I need to go out and apologize or whatever. Shame is the sense that I am something wrong, and I need to hide it because it's unfixable. It's simply who I am, and I need to protect myself from others, essentially. And so we can have sin and have guilt about it, and let that guilt, in a very holy way, motivate us to go out and redeem what's been done. But if we have shame about it, we'll just hide it and bury it and let those wrongs fester.
Let me ask you this: when you look at the culture at large, and the average person, I guess, and you see what appears to be such indifference to activity, to behavior in the culture, that where does the Holy Spirit get a hook into somebody to bring a healthy sense of guilt, the way you mistreated somebody,
right.
the way, and you see so much of it in the world today. There's just this polarization that's occurring. It's like few people have the presence to say, I shouldn't treat another human being the way I just treated that person. Why is that occurring? Is it up from other decades? Is it different from other generations? Is this really the normal human experience, and it's just unshackled, and this is often how human beings treat each other? And then that indifference, speak to that, especially for the Christian community, where we can tend to absorb some of the cultural trends, and we start speaking in ways about people that we shouldn't. How do we open our hearts up to the Holy Spirit to teach us and to rebuke us in healthy ways?
Right. Well,
big question.
There's a lot there. I will say that personally, I think that the data that we're starting to see shows that culturally you are starting to see more. We're seeing vast changes in culture, especially amongst adolescents who are increasingly connected online and through social media. We're seeing a very rapid change in behavior. Kids who are more depressed, more anxious. Those things are happening. I don't think it's fair anymore to say, well, every generation goes through its thing. Technology is shifting things.
It's more intense today.
It's more intense
than ever before.
Absolutely.
Let me shift back to the household, because I think where we find our worthiness is also an issue. I mean, obviously, the right answer is to say you find that in your relationship with Jesus Christ. He's our anchor. He provides the way, and even lists very clearly our behavioral type, what we should, if we're rooted in Him, how we will behave if we're rooted in Him.
Yep.
That's Galatians 5. But to try to find our worthiness outside of that, either with our spouse or in our children.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of women struggle with that, finding their worthiness in their kids. And it's leading to a lot of separation and divorce within the church, because the kids are leaving at 18, 19, and women, for the most part, are opening their eyes going, I don't even know my husband anymore. We're no longer friends. My whole life now has been committed to these kids. And they, in some ways, are even lost in that moment.
Right. In my experience, when we've decided that what is inside of us is not good enough, it's not worthy, then we draw the natural conclusion is we have to go look outside of us for our sense of worthiness. And that there's two particular areas that we tend to look for that in. It's in people, in our relationships, and in our families and our friendships and those kinds of things. And then also in our, if you want to call it our purpose or our sense of vocation or our compulsion to do something great to prove that we're good enough, right? And so I do think that what you're describing is that when we get into families, we are expecting our spouse to make us feel lovable.
Right.
And oftentimes when that's not working out, then we will shift our focus to our kids. Maybe they will make us feel lovable by reflecting us or making us proud, or maybe we'll prove, like kids become our projects, right? We'll prove that we're good enough by producing children that are, the pressure on a child to have to prove your worth by doing things that make you feel like you've done a good job as a parent, that's intense. So we want to be cautious of this idea that we're going to get a sense of worthiness from the people around us. We really do have to take an interior journey, not an outward journey.
And that's part of the parenting process, is how do you build up your child's sense of self-worth in a healthy biblical way?
Well, I'll go back to what you just asked about the indifference piece of things. So recently, I can't even remember what my daughter did, but I reacted to her. I gave her a consequence relatively calmly. And then about 5 minutes later, I said, "So, sweetie, what do you want for lunch?" "Grilled cheese, peanut butter, and jelly." And she goes, "Daddy, why are you making me lunch? Aren't you mad at me?" And I said, "What do you mean, sweetie?" She goes, "Well, you just punished me." And I said, "Well, Yeah, you have to have consequences when you do things that you really shouldn't be doing. But I love you. I'm always going to feed you and care for you, and no matter what you do, And so I think if the only reaction to misbehavior is shame, and we don't want to shame our kids, then we decide we have to be indifferent to it, right? Or we have to be indifferent to our friend's behavior. Oh, it's okay. I'm just not even going to address it. It's possible to say, I don't like what you did, but I adore you. I delight in you. Right?
And it's important for the parent
Absolutely.
to make sure that even if they don't ask the question, that you're reinforcing that
Right.
as best as possible.
You have to, exactly. She gave me an opportunity.
Right.
There, right. I love that she's like, this isn't adding up. But
Right.
It's never adding up for our
Yeah.
kids, and so we have to go out of our way to.
But
explain
oftentimes the child won't express that, and
Right.
you've got to be in tune enough as a parent to know that they may be wounded, and how do they better understand that. So that,
Yeah.
I think, is a good approach. You had a piano experience, I think, with your daughter that really caught my attention.
Yeah.
I love the way you learn through what's around you. So what happened with the piano?
You just get to watch your kids. They're so unfiltered. They teach you just through the fact that they're not hiding anything or protecting anything.
That's right.
So, yeah, she had been wanting to take piano for years, and we finally were able to get a piano. And I could hear her downstairs playing, and she came upstairs shortly thereafter, and I asked her how it went, and she said, Dad, it's really hard to play the piano when you're thinking about how happy your mom and dad are that you're playing the piano.
No, that's right.
Right? And
She was very
so
cognizant of that.
yeah, like she's sitting down there playing, and her mind's going to, what are people thinking of what I'm doing?
But it's not like you had expressed, do it right.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. She was just thinking, Mom and Dad are really happy that I'm playing the piano. And so it's not just Mom and Dad are going to be disappointed in me.
Yeah.
It's this constant referencing of how will people be reacting, even if it's positively to what I do. It's a lot of what we do is we go out in the world hoping that the crowds will respond positively to it, right?
Yeah, Kelly, let me ask you though, when you're trying to fill your child up with that kind of self-confidence, I think you can go overboard too,
Yeah.
where they have a false sense of that. In other words, they know they're not. It's giving a trophy to everybody. I mean, we see that in the culture today.
Yeah, right.
There's no first place winner.
Right.
Everybody's a first place winner.
Right.
Well, the world really doesn't operate that way.
No, it doesn't.
There is first place and second place and last place.
Yeah.
And I think
you see
there's
this. Yeah, you see this pendulum swing
Right.
from we're going to shame our kids as coaches to we're going to give everybody a trophy.
So how do we as Christian parents do a biblical job, a godly job of making sure our kids are not, the rug's not taken out from under their sense of self-worth, yet they have a dose of reality?
Yeah. Well, in the Bible, when someone encounters the unconditional love of God, they're often renamed.
Interesting.
And I think, so one of the things, for instance, since you mentioned soccer, one of the things that we do, myself and my co-coach on our soccer teams is somewhere near the end of the season, after we've gotten to know the kids, we do awards instead of awards. Awards, right. And so we pick a word that we think exemplifies who they are.
Unique to that child.
Unique to that child,
Oh,
not
that's
how
good.
they played, but we write the word on it. We write their name, the word, and then the definition, and then we give it to them in a ceremony.
What would be an example? Does one kid pop out for you?
Oh yeah, so loyal would be one that pops out for my son.
Okay.
When he has decided that you're one of his people, his teammate, his friend, or
He's
whatever,
all in.
That kid is all in, man. I would. Someday, some people are going to be really lucky to have him for a friend. And so they didn't get trophies saying everybody performed the same, everybody's behavior was equivalent, but they got words that actually distinguished them from each other and tried to name who they are and the beautiful thing that is in them.
Well, and again, I love your blog. I love what you are saying to your daughter in the letters you've written. What a great idea for all fathers. I've journaled for my two boys, and that's what I've done. When I did the international work, I'd travel and I would spend hours journaling. They've got a nice leather bound journal now. I haven't given it to them yet. I think it'll be at the end of their senior year. They'll both get their journals. And thoughts and ideas and praise and concern. I'm stating what I'm concerned about, but hopefully in a way that is constructive for them and to be have an eye on for their own character and behavior.
So if they're typical young men,
I'm sure they
ignore
are.
it. They'll ignore it for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
You know,
About
and-
26, 7, they'll
Yes.
probably crack it open.
Yes, and it will be.
Oh, look,
it'll
Dad
be-
said that.
Totally, it'll be a treasure at that point.
But it is what you enjoy doing, and it's a great model for the rest of us. I do want to touch on the idea of grace because it's so critical, so misunderstood today, I think. And in a culture that buries you, you know, takes you down if you don't measure up to some kind of criteria, we can forget God's grace toward us and for us. Especially the person listening right now who may not have a relationship with Christ. She's been buried in relationships. She's not found any worth, a sense of worth, the way men have treated her. Maybe she's had an abortion because that relationship she had ended poorly, and she didn't feel like she could raise a child because of her finances, whatever the reason. Speak to me as if you're speaking to her about God's grace. What would you say to me? And I'm in the bottom of the barrel right now. You don't know my life.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah. I think what I would say is, there's one person who knows you better than anyone else. This person created your soul, sent it into the world in this particular body, and it hasn't been easy for you. But there is someone with a capital S who still remembers the little one that he created, and can see that little one still in you, and is just waiting for you to see it too. And he'll if you dedicate your life to listening for his voice within you, you'll get there. You'll discover that little one again.
Dr. Kelly Flanagan, author of the book Lovable, you have given us so much to think about, and it's the right stuff. Don't be awkwardly overconfident, and don't be awkwardly searching for meaning and worth in what the world has to offer. Find it in Christ, and let Him be your identity. And man, this life is so much better, which is what He promises when you're in that spot. Hey, Kelly, this has been so good. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Hey, I'm John Fuller, and thanks for watching. Get more info about Focus over here and more from our guests over there, and be sure to subscribe to our channel as well.